Ah, the humble jump scare, the lowest common denominator of modern horror. A loud noise, a twitchy camera, and boom! A cat leaps from a cupboard, its horror's equivalent of a toddler banging pots together and calling it music. And yet somehow Hollywood can't get enough of it. Entire franchises built on nothing but volume and shadows. It's cheap, lazy, and worst of all, temporary. You flinch, maybe laugh, and then move on. But British horror doesn't need jump scares. It doesn't want to scare you for a second. It wants to sit in your gut for days. It wants to ruin your mood, destroy your optimism, and question your moral compass. It's not loud, it's cruel, and that cruelty has evolved from capes and castles to council flats and cults. So today we're asking, when did British horror become so vicious? Spoiler alert, it always was. Welcome to the Snake Pit, where we're full of bile and venom. I'm your host, Snake Daemon, and today we're slicing deep into the rotting marrow of Britain's horror legacy. From the dignified depravity of Hammer horror to the hopeless carnage of Eden Lake, we're tracing the blood trail of British horror's evolution, and how we got from velvet-draped Dracula to feral hoodie slashers with gardening tools. So let's wind back the clock, crack open the crypt, and dig into the sheer cruelty of British horror. 1950s to 60s, the Gothic Era, Hammer time, but not the fun kind. British horror in the mid-20th century was cloaked in class, quite literally. Capes, castles, and crucifixes, but beneath the velvet and stage blood was repression, moral, sexual, emotional. Hammer films owned this era, churning out the likes of Horror of Dracula, The Curse of Frankenstein, and The Devil Rides Out. These weren't just monster movies. They were stories about desire turned lethal. Christopher Lee's Dracula wasn't just a vampire. He was every prim and proper Victorian's worst nightmare about sexuality made flesh. And the violence for its time scandalous. Hammer showed blood in full color when everyone else was still playing coy, but it was always personal. Death came as punishment, for lust, for knowledge, for thinking you could outrun tradition. Behind every stake was a warning: don't challenge the natural order, or it'll bury you alive in a coffin full of regrets. 1970s to 80s, folk horror and the decline of society. As Britain itself started to fracture, with economic collapse, strikes and rising cynicism, its horror turned paranoid and pagan. Welcome to the golden age of folk horror. Films like The Wicker Man 1973, where the real horror is sunlight, cheerfulness and ritualistic community spirit. The Blood on Satan's Claw 1971, teenagers mutilating themselves in the name of some unseen evil. The Shout 1978, a man who can literally kill with a scream, because why not? Folk horror traded monsters for myth and madness. These weren't supernatural stories, they were cultural dissection. The horror came from outsiders walking into old rural systems they couldn't comprehend and getting chewed up by them. And let's not forget The Omen, yes, a British co-production. Posh Satanism meets political ambition. British horror in this era was whispering, you might have escaped the castle, but now the entire countryside wants you dead. The 1990s were weird. The horror wasn't as visible, but it was boiling under the surface. Enter the Hole, 2001 technically, but produced in the 90s. Private school kids locked themselves underground for a party. One ends up a sociopath, the rest dead. It was Lord of the Flies in a prep school toilet cubicle. We also got early Clive Barker, Hellraiser, 1987, but echoed into the 90s. Filmed in British suburbs, soaked in marital misery and sex demons, it took kink, grief and Catholic guilt and wrapped it in latex and hooks. And then there's the birth of lad horror, films that were just starting to mix humour with sadism, a warm-up for the horrors to come. 2000s, No Hope, No Heroes, The Misery Renaissance. This is where the cruelty truly metastasized. Let's list the offenders. Eden Lake, 2008. A masterclass in class warfare horror. White-collar couple meets hoodie gang. No monsters, just broken homes, a knife, and no survivors you care about. The Children, 2008. Kids get infected by a virus and brutally murder their parents. Christmas dinner never looked so traumatic. Wilderness, 2006. Troubled teens dropped on an island. A man with dogs hunts them for revenge. It's Lord of the Flies with attack canines and knife etiquette. Creep, 2004. Woman trapped in the London Underground with a creature birthed in bureaucracy and neglect. It's The Descent. If it smelled like piss and old meat. Severance, 2006. Corporate team-building exercise turns into satirical survival horror. Imagine The Office if Gareth got beheaded with a machete. Doghouse, 2009. Misogynistic lads face zombified women. Allegory, satire, doesn't matter. Everyone deserves to die in this one. The Cottage, 2008. Kidnapping gone wrong, ends in Texas chainsaw-style rural slaughter. Starts funny, ends cruel. Shrooms, 2007 is drug-fueled hallucination trip in Irish woods. The twist, everyone's just dumb. This decade said, you thought horror was supposed to be fun? Not here. In Britain, the fun stops the moment you press play. 2010, as now the institutionalization of horror. Modern British horror has taken all this cruelty and added layers of systemic decay. Now it's not just bad luck. It's the consequence of failed systems. Mental health, the education system, class divides, broken family units, immigration paranoia. Films like Ghost Stories from 2017, horror as repressed trauma. His House from 2020, immigration meets haunted guilt. St. Maud from 2019, religious obsession, mental breakdown, self-immolation. It's not just about death, it's about living with trauma so long that death feels like mercy. British horror isn't about making you scream, it's about making you stare into the void and realize you're the problem. You're the nosy neighbor, the failed parent, the toxic boyfriend, the bystander, the sinner. Where American horror is external conflict, British horror is internal rot. It doesn't care if you like the characters, it doesn't care if there's a final girl, it doesn't care if you're entertained, it just wants you to feel worse than when you started. So, if you're sick of loud noises and CGI ghosts, crawl back into the cellar of British horror. It's quiet, they're too quiet, but that's because it's waiting, not to scare you, but to unravel you. Thanks for dropping by the snake pit where we thrive on untapped potential and lost opportunities. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell, like the video, and leave your opinions in the comments, where, naturally, I won't read them. Until next time, stay venomous.